Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Jake Reid coming back at you with another video today. I apologize, this is take 2. I apologize if you were around for take 1 where I was trying to explain this whole topic and my mic wasn't working. So we're actually going to dive into a topic that's come up a couple times in my comment section lately, and that is the use of 5th year options here in Madden 20. Hopefully this feature will be carried over to Madden 21 because it adds an extra element of realism, because this is a decision that NFL GMs and owners have to face every single year, whether or not to utilize the 5th year option on players in order to either help themselves or try to kind of skate by with a player for a year. So when can you use a 5th year option here in Madden 20? When will they pop up? How to use them, and which scenarios are positive or negative to utilize a 5th year option? I want to start by saying that I personally feel that there is never necessarily a bad time to use a 5th year option. You're never necessarily going to detrimentally hurt your team by utilizing the 5th year option. But what I will say is that there are certain times where it can be advantageous to not use the 5th year option. From a monetary perspective, there are some opportunities where it's better to sign a player earlier than to use your 5th year option on them. So let's go ahead, and I'm actually going to advance the week here from off-season free agency week 2 to off-season free agency week 3, because that is when you'll get the option to utilize a 5th year option. Sometimes you'll get the option to utilize it on multiple players. Sometimes you only get it on one player. I've heard people say that there are times when there are players on their team that should have the option, don't get the pop-up for it. I can't attest to why that happens, because I believe I've had that happen to myself as well. I think Madden, just the developers may not have covered every single player that should be eligible for a 5th year option, or sometimes there's a glitch in the system. But once you hit off-season free agency week 3, this is what's going to pop up on your screen under the Things to Do tab. Now, there's no other way to get to this. There's no other tab it's going to pop up under. You can't get to it from anywhere else except for the Things to Do tab. So make sure that when you hit off-season free agency week 3, you're paying attention to this tab, because this is where you're going to get this thing where it's going to say big decision, 5th year option, which players are you in or are in your long-term plans. So let's go ahead and click on it, and we'll do a little bit of a discussion with it. So when you click on it, it's going to come up with a question. It's going to ask you something similar to this, where it says, hey, quick question, have you taken a look at some of our soon-to-expire contracts, specifically TJ Watt's deal? And then it's going to run through this where it's going to say, is he in your long-term plans? You know, he's either done well for you or hasn't done well for you. He has been on the field, hasn't been on the field. Sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like this one is saying, I'm hesitant to give him a contract because he was barely on the field last season, which obviously doesn't make sense for TJ Watt. So essentially what you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to answer yes. I think that whether you answer yes or whether you answer no, I don't know, but this option is going to pop up either way. I've never actually answered no, because I always say that they're going to be in my plans one way or another, just because that's what I've done before, and I know that that gives me the option. You guys could probably clarify for me in the comment section if you hit no to that question, whether or not it still gives you the option to select yes or no to actually picking up the 5th year option. So once you actually answer that question, it's going to ask you, in that case, do you want to go ahead and pick up the 5th year option? And then you're going to have the answer to say yes or no, or ask them what they think, and they'll give you their opinion on it. So this is where it comes time to make your big decision. So when do you want to use the 5th year option, and when do you not want to use the 5th year option? First and foremost, we'll start with the easy one. The easy one is a player that you do want to use the 5th year option on. That would be a player that has gotten to a point in your franchise where they need a year to prove themselves. You're not ready to give them a big contract yet, and you don't know if you'll be ready to give them a big contract in a year from now. But you want to give them a year to prove themselves. If it's a player that you're going to immediately move on from, I don't say give them the 5th year option. What you would want to do in that case is trade them away or let them walk. But if it's a player that you want to still have the opportunity to prove themselves, that's when you're going to utilize the 5th year option on that player, because you'll be able to keep that player around on his rookie contract, which is a reduced salary, for another year, allow them to prove themselves, and then if they do prove themselves, you can give them a contract negotiation in a year from now, or you can let them walk at that point. So that's when you're going to want to use the 5th year option. When you're not going to want to use the 5th year option, is actually something that I've changed my stance on before. So with a player like TJ Watt, for example, in the past, I've said to use the 5th-year option because he's a good player. You'll be able to have him around for another year for cheap. That's actually, in my opinion, incorrect now, based off of some of the feedback that I've gotten from other people, based on some discussions with people in my comment section. I've changed my tune on this. For a player like a TJ Watt that you know is really good, you know he's going to be in your plans long term, what you're going to want to do is pass on the 5th-year option for that player. Now, why do you want to pass on the 5th-year option for a player like TJ Watt? The reason that you want to pass on a player like that, pass on a 5th-year option for a player like that, is because you want to negotiate a contract with them as soon as possible. Because let's say you 5th-year option this guy, what's going to happen in a year from now? Essentially what's going to happen is, yes, you'll have them on your team for a cheap amount of money for an extra year, but in a year from now they're going to be a higher overall, they will have produced more sacks or whatever the stat might be for that specific player, and they're going to want more money. The Madden system is going to factor those things into account. It's going to take account to the fact that he's a higher overall, and he's going to want more money. He's going to want a more significant contract. So what I say is, if you know that it's a player that's going to be in your plans for a long amount of time, if it's a really good player, negotiate the contract with them as soon as possible. Re-sign TJ Watt now so that you get him for a reduced amount of money compared to what you would get for him in a year from now. Yes, you're going to be paying him more this year because you're negotiating a contract with him than you would by exercising his 5th-year option. But in the long run, you're going to save yourself a tremendous amount of money because of the fact that you chose to negotiate with him while he was an 85 as opposed to a 90 or a 95. Whatever his overall ends up being. What I will say, though, there's one more situation where it becomes a little bit tricky. Let's say you have a good player like a TJ Watt and your team is hurting for salary cap and you don't have the money to offer him a big contract right now. What I recommend doing in that case is offering, or rather picking up the 5th-year option, because you can't offer it. It's a option that you have. So pick up the 5th-year option for that player, have them under contract for a reduced amount of money for a year, and then utilize your ability to fix your cap space and create space so that you can give him a contract in a year from now. That's the only case with a player like this that you would want to exercise the 5th-year option, because you're going to be costing yourself more money in the long run by exercising the 5th-year option. So if you're hurting for cap, yeah, the 5th-year option might be a way to go to help yourself out and keep your player around for longer. Generally speaking, you're going to want to not exercise the 5th-year option. If it's a player that still needs to prove themselves, yeah, go ahead, give them that 5th-year option, because then you give them that year on a cheap deal, you allow them to prove themselves, and if they prove themselves, if they develop, hey, you can get him on a contract a year from now. That's fine. Like I said, I don't think it's ever a detriment necessarily. I don't think it's ever going to heavily detriment your team to offer a player or accept their 5th-year option, rather. Because in the long run, you're getting a player for a pretty fair price. You're getting a player for a price that's going to help your team out. You're going to hurt yourself in the long run with negotiations on big money players, big contract players, but that's the only drawback to it. So if you guys agree with me, you disagree with me, make sure you leave that in the comment section. If you like the video, if you like the content, if you want more of the content, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're new. Comment down below with what you guys would like to see next. Have you guys been exercising your 5th-year options? Are you going to change what you're doing with your 5th-year options? Let me know that in the comment section. I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Have a good night.